Today, I'm interviewing Jack Jeffrey, a longtime resident on the Big Island of Hawaii. He is a biologist, photographer, and avid birder. He has observed and studied Hawaii's endemic birds for over 30 years. He has won many awards for his conservation efforts, including the 2002 Ansel Adams Award for Conservation Photography. Thanks so much for having me, Jack.
My pleasure. Glad to have you here.
All right, so let's start. So the first question I have for you, how did you get started working on the Hakalau Forest Wildlife Refuge?
It was a long time ago, in the 70s. I was involved with the Hawaii Forest Bird Survey, and from that survey, Hakalau Forest came to be. I was involved with Hawaiian birds for a long time. And the refuge needed a biologist, and I applied, and I had lots of experience, and they hired me. And here I am, how many years later? 30 years later, still doing work at Hakalau Forest, although I've retired.
Oh, that's great. So you obviously like the native birds, but many of them are rapidly declining. And what are the biggest threats that the native birds face?
The biggest threats, probably one of the biggest threats, is habitat loss. Over the years, even 1,000 years ago when the Polynesians got here, they did slash and burn agriculture. And then in the early 1800s, when the Europeans arrived, they brought in cattle, sheep, goats, grazing animals. And because the Hawaiian plants had lost their defense mechanisms because of over millions of years of evolution, without mammals in Hawaii, the plants lost their defense mechanisms. And the mammals just ate everything. I think I mentioned earlier, it was like a giant salad bar. These animals ate everything. And that's what's caused a lot of destruction for habitat loss. And then during the 1800s, mosquitoes were introduced. There were never any mosquitoes in Hawaii prior to that. Once the mosquitoes got here, and probably during that time and prior to that time, people had been bringing chickens and ducks and other birds here, and somehow avian malaria and avian pox got here. The native forest birds had no resistance to these diseases because they didn't evolve with these diseases. And so even to this day, like an EEV, one bite from a malarial mosquito and they roll over dead in 2 to 3 weeks. So what's happened is mosquitoes began to move up in elevation. So we've lost the birds on the low islands. When I first moved here in the early 70s, mosquitoes were up to about 3,000 feet elevation. Since that time, they've moved up to about 4,500 feet. For the most part, we don't find any native forest birds below 4,500 feet. But you will still find Hawaiian hawks. You will still find like coots, gallinules, and stilts and coots. Thank you. And these birds are somewhat resistant. Now, the Hawaiian honeycreepers, just recently, 2 species, Amakihi and Apapane, have developed some resistance to these diseases, and you can find them in areas where there's native forest at low elevations, which isn't much in Hawaii, because most of the low elevation forest is gone. But you can find, like in Kalapana, you can find not EEV, but Apapane and Amakihi all the way down to sea level. But a bird like an Akiapola'au that has less than 1,000 individuals left, what are the chances of that becoming resistant? Probably 0.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 2. Then there's competition from introduced birds and other things like yellow jacket wasps, which feed on native insects, which reduce the insect populations. Honeybees, which eat the nectar. Honeybees were introduced. They eat the nectar from the trees, so there's less nectar for the birds. So that kind of competition. And then predators. Rats are terrible predators. They climb trees, and we now have 3 species of rats here that are either competing and or depredating native forest birds.
So why are the shapes of the bills of the Hawaiian native birds so varied? Like some are very decurved and some are small and straight. And so why is that?
I don't know. You look at just in the honeycreepers alone, you're looking at about 500, excuse me, 5.5 million years of evolution, and you're looking at adaptive radiation, where various birds have evolved eating different plant life. Some became nectar feeders, some became insect feeders. A bird like the Akiapola owl, although it's an insect feeder, it's evolved into the woodpecker niche. Again, it's the evolution over millions of years and adaptive radiation to the food sources. Look at the EEV bill. And a good example is the cover of the brochure. If you look at the EEV and you look at this mint flower, the mint flower is exactly the same shape as that EEV bill, fits like a glove. And so this is how many of these birds evolved. So we have specialists and we have generalists. The problem is most of the specialists are now gone because basically their food source disappeared, and it's not like you can change your bill in a week. So you end up going extinct. And but anyway, this is a really good example of that type of evolution.
Yeah, great example of coevolution. So finally, what are some things that we, just as people, can do to help Hawaiian native birds?
Well, there's a lot of things that people can do. The problem is people don't realize that there's native birds in Hawaii. As we mentioned earlier, the ABA, American Birding Association, has just added Hawaii to their regional list. Now we're hoping to be able to get more people who understand what Hawaii is all about and what the problems are. There's several ways a lot of different ways that people can help out. Volunteering is a big thing. Like here at Hakalau Forest, if it weren't for the volunteers, there's a lot of stuff that wouldn't be done, like the tree planting, the endangered species outplantings, things like that are important. Belonging to the Friends of Hakalau Forest, donating money to help various projects, like help keep the greenhouses going, help buy plant materials. Although the federal government is who finances Hakalau Forest, over the past few years, budgets have been dropping. There's not enough money to do things. So volunteering and donating money. And just recently, we started an endowment. And the endowment is the Hakalau Forest Management Endowment. And that endowment is to be able to get enough money to fill in as budgets drop. It'll, like, for instance, and this is mainly for pig and cattle control, mainly for pig control. What's happening up here is when budgets drop, you lose staff. When you lose staff, you can't keep up with the pig control. So pigs, again, gain a foothold. But if we were able to contract people to maintain that base level of management or pig control, then when the budget comes back up to snuff, when we're able to hire enough people, they're not having to do catch up. I mean, trying to do one step forward and two steps back, you can't do that way. You can't run a national wildlife refuge that way. So by donating to the Hakalau Forest Management Endowment, people can help grow this endowment, and it's going to be in perpetuity. It's not something that's not a one-shot deal, because we're hoping to get to a funding level of $5 million. I put you down for 2. Is that okay? Would you be able to just write me a check?
All right.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Anyway, and then once we reach that point, then all the funding is just interest that comes off of that. So this will go on in perpetuity. And on years that they don't need the money, the value of the endowment grows. On years that they do need the money, the interest then can be used for that. And these are some of the things that can be done. Also, being a birder and educating yourself about Hawaii's birds. And it's not just the forest birds. I mean, the seabirds and the water birds all need help. I mean, you look how much, not only on the mainland have we lost wetlands, but even in Hawaii we've lost a lot of wetlands. And all of our wetland birds, the ducks, coots, stilts, and moorhens, they're all endangered. So these are things that some of the things that people can do to help out.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much for the interview. And yeah, really great.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.